You know, you see them all the time, the yes men, the people who seem to flock around powerful leaders. And it's really easy to just write them off as simple flatterers, right? But what we're talking about today, sycophancy, is so much more than that. It's this deep psychological force that can genuinely shape history, often in some pretty terrifying ways. Today, we're going to get right into the mind of the sycophant and see why this behavior is so incredibly dangerous, especially when it gets into politics. And it all boils down to one really important question. So where is that line? You know? When does a nice compliment or just showing a bit of respect cross over into something, well, something calculated, something much more hazardous? Figuring that out is exactly what we're going to do. All right, to get why this is so dangerous, we have to start with the person. We need to get inside their heads. So let's start by, well, dissecting the psychological anatomy of a yes man. What really makes them tick? Okay, so first things first, let's get a clear clinical definition on the table. According to psychiatric experts, a sycophant isn't just someone being polite. It's a persistent pattern of behavior. And it's all driven by a very specific, self-serving goal: gaining a personal advantage. It is, for all intents and purposes, manipulation disguised as admiration. So what's going on under the hood? Well, a lot of this behavior actually comes from a really deep-seated insecurity. Sycophants often don't believe they can get ahead on their own merits, so they turn to manipulation. It's like they see other people not as people, but as tools, instruments to get what they want. And it's that intense fear of rejection, that fear of failure, that pushes them to just throw authenticity out the window for the safety of agreeing with whoever's in charge. And this leads to a classic telltale sign, the kiss up, kick down phenomenon. And wow, the difference in behavior is it's night and day. Towards a boss or a superior, they're all smiles, all flattery, total deference. But towards a subordinate, someone they can't get anything from, suddenly they can be dismissive, condescending, sometimes even abusive. It's a dead giveaway that their kindness is purely an act. This creates this really fascinating and, frankly, toxic partnership called a narcissistic symbiosis. Think of it like this. You have a narcissistic leader who has this bottomless need for admiration. And then you have the sycophant, who's like a bottomless supply of it. The leader gets their ego fed, and in return, the sycophant gets access to power. They get a feeling of importance they could never get on their own. It's this perfectly dysfunctional, self-sustaining loop. Okay, so we've looked at the individual, but now let's zoom out. Because what happens when this behavior doesn't just stay with one person, but scales up and infects an entire system of government? That's when things get truly scary. And this quote really gets to the heart of the political danger. Sycophants build an echo chamber. It's like a bubble around the leader. They filter out all the bad news, all the disagreement, all the uncomfortable truths. Pretty soon, the leader is just hearing their own ideas bounced back at them, completely cut off from what's actually happening. And when a leader is blind to reality, well, catastrophic decisions are pretty much guaranteed. Now, you might be thinking, why on earth would any leader want this? Well, for an autocratic leader, loyalty isn't just nice to have, it's everything. It's a survival strategy. See, a competent advisor, someone with independent judgment, that person could be a rival one day. But a sycophant? They're totally dependent. They'll never disagree. They pose zero threat. It's a calculated choice to put power way ahead of actual performance. And make no mistake, this doesn't just happen by accident. It's a deliberate process. Leaders actively cultivate this environment. First, they reward the flatterers, right? Promotions, money, you name it. Second, they use fear. They punish anyone who speaks up or thinks for themselves. And third, they make absolutely sure that their inner circle has no power of their own, that they're totally dependent on the leader for everything. It's a system that's literally designed to manufacture loyalty. Okay, this all sounds pretty grim, I know, but knowledge is power. So how can we, as citizens, just people watching the news, how can we spot this dangerous behavior out in the wild? This next part is basically a toolkit for all of us. Here are the red flags you gotta watch for. It starts with that constant, over-the-top, uncritical praise. Then, when things inevitably go wrong, notice how the blame is always shifted somewhere else, to scapegoats. You'll see critics get publicly shamed and viciously attacked. And you'll see loyalty get promoted over actual expertise every single time. But maybe the biggest warning sign of all is when facts that contradict the leader's story are just completely ignored, or worse, twisted to fit the narrative. And here's a really important word of caution. This stuff can happen so slowly, bit by bit. It's like that old boiling frog syndrome. The behavior gets more and more extreme, But because the change is so gradual, people can get desensitized to it. What was once completely shocking just becomes normal. And that normalization is one of the biggest dangers of all. But there is an antidote to all this, and it comes from one of the most celebrated leaders in all of history. Let's take a look at Abraham Lincoln, because he provides this incredible counterexample to everything we've just talked about. To really get how radical Lincoln's strategy was, you have to start with this one number, 39.8%. That's how much of the popular vote he got in 1860. He won with less than a majority, his name wasn't even on the ballot in 10 states, and the country was literally about to tear itself apart. And the personal attacks on him, they were brutal. They called him a dangerous fanatic, an unrefined amateur who was totally out of his depth, even a tyrant in waiting. In a climate that hostile, the easy move, the safe move, would have been to surround himself with nothing but loyal allies, circle the wagons. But Lincoln, he did the exact opposite. His entire approach is this profound historical counterexample. He actively rejected the comfort and safety of an echo chamber, right when he probably needed it most. His choices for his cabinet were just audacious. I mean, think about this. His Secretary of State, William Seward, was a guy who openly thought Lincoln was his inferior. His Treasury Secretary, Salmon Chase, looked down on him and was constantly maneuvering to take his job. His Secretary of War, Edwin Stanton, had been one of his loudest, fiercest critics in public. Lincoln didn't just put up with dissent, he invited his biggest rivals to the table. So why on earth would he do it? It was an absolute masterstroke of strategy. He knew that to hold a broken country together, he needed the best and the brightest people in the room, no matter how they felt about him personally. He was secure enough in himself to know that having a debate, having different opinions, would lead to better decisions. And by bringing his rivals in, he could use their incredible talents for the cause of the Union, instead of having them attack him from the outside. And in the end, Lincoln's legacy really shows us what a truly secure leader looks like. He proved that real strength doesn't come from demanding blind loyalty. It comes from having the confidence to welcome a challenge, to encourage debate, and to put talent ahead of flattery. He didn't need sycophants because he wasn't afraid of the truth. Which leaves us all with one final question to think about. When it comes to leadership, and maybe even in our own lives, does true strength come from demanding that everyone just agree with you, or does it come from having the courage to embrace and even learn from a real challenge? The answer to that, well, that might just be our ultimate defense against the danger of the sycophant.